Hello, everyone. Today we are discussing social penetration theory. This is from my Com Theory course 303. Um, we've discussed some of these issues in class before with regard to self-disclosure issues, but we're going to kind of dig a little bit deeper with regard to what this might look like. There's a few key concepts you need to recognize. We're going to start off with this idea of mutual vulnerability. All right. So mutual vulnerability means that as people begin to get closer with each other, one of the things that is required for that closeness is that both people are disclosing similar types of information at a depth that is reciprocated. All right. So you can't have a deep friendship where one person is constantly disclosing um, vulnerable information to the other person, and the other person is guarded and held back. That's more of a therapy session, right? A professional psychologist, you can sit in a counselor's office and you can tell them all of your deep, dark secrets. They help you work through those problems, but you don't have a close, intimate, personal relationship with your therapist because they are not reciprocating those sorts of deep secrets of their own. All right. So in order for a relationship to progress um, in a way that is equal, that in a way that is shared, you have to have mutual vulnerability from both parties. Otherwise, you have this sort of unequal vulnerability, and that's not a close friendship. Again, that's more of a sort of uh, therapist-patient relationship. There's going to be clear issues of power. If I disclose a lot of information and my friend doesn't, all of a sudden my friend has, some sort of power over me because they have access to information of me. I don't have access to information from them. All right. So let's do a little case study here. All right. Here's a film that I would recommend that you watch. It's COVID time. You have the time. Some people knock it because it's 3 hours long. I think it's a great movie. I've watched it multiple times. Every time I watch it, I get a little something different out of it. So there's this movie called Meet Joe Black. Brad Pitt's in it and other famous people. So it's a good blockbuster movie to watch. It's based on this 1934 film called Death Takes a Holiday. And I'm going to give a little bit away, but this mostly all happens in the first 30 minutes of a 3 hour movie, so it's not giving out a lot. So death takes a holiday, right? So the manifestation of death, right? The Grim Reaper who comes at you and to take you to the other world. Um, Death is tired of just sort of doing his job, and he wants to take a holiday. He wants to take a little vacation. He wants to sort of explore the world around him, right? So the character Death wants to experience life, and in Meet Joe Black, he wants to experience through the lens of Bill Parrish. Bill Parrish is over here, played by Anthony Hopkins. And by sort of experiencing the world through Bill Parrish is this sort of like media mogul billionaire. Think of a guy who owns something like CNN or whatever. He's sort of like made this empire for himself. So he has this very lavish lifestyle, but he's also a very generous person. He's a good family man. His family loves him. He just seems like a very caring individual who's also led this like very extraordinary life, right? He's made, millions, if not billions of dollars for himself and his company and everything else. He's lived this like fantastic life. So Death knows that, Anthony Hopkins' character is about to die. But before he takes him to the other side, Death is like, let me kind of live through this guy for a little bit. Let me kind of get into his life, and I'm going to spend like a week with him before I sort of take him away. So in this process, Death meets Parrish's daughter, Susan, all right, and he starts this, romantic relationship with her, right? Death takes on the form of Brad Pitt, and so obviously Susan is rather attracted to Brad Pitt, playing the role of Death. And so she thinks that he's a real person. She doesn't know that he's this, otherworldly individual. All right. So the question that I have for you all is, how does this relationship unfold, right? And I'm going to put this YouTube clip down below, and this YouTube clip kind of has this scene between the two of them where they reach this point in their relationship where Susan's trying to go further. She's like, we need to be mutually vulnerable. Like, we need to peel off the layers, right? We'll get to the peeling of the onion here in a second. And Brad Pitt's character, Death, is sort of unwilling because he's unable to peel back any of those layers because obviously those layers are like, I'm Death, right? I'm not a real person. Like this relationship isn't going to work. So it's going to be harder for you can see this struggle where it's hard for Susan and Brad Pitt's character to actually fully engage in a trusting, loving, romantic relationship because there is no mutual vulnerability. Right? So go ahead and watch this quick YouTube clip, and obviously you can see how what are the stumbling blocks in a relationship when one person is opening up and another person is unable or unwilling to open up, right? And you might have these sort of moments in your own life where you've asked a romantic partner to take it to the next level. You want to meet each other's families, they're unwilling or unable to, and you sort of realize like that's the next step. And if we don't get to the next step, this doesn't have any long term. This isn't going to have any long term success. All right. So go ahead and check out this YouTube clip, and I'll see you on the next slide. All right, so social penetration theory, right? Healthy relationship means being vulnerable sometimes, all right? So we're over here in the definition. Interpersonal relationships evolve in some gradual and predictable fashion. The predictable fashion is, hi, my name is Josh, you introduce yourself. Okay, now let's talk about family a little bit, maybe talk about politics, religion a little bit. Then we get into some sort of like personal conversations, right? There are ways in which we understand that there are certain topics that we have to discuss first before we get to the more sort of deeper, intimate topics of our lives. All right. Social penetration theorists believe that self-disclosure is a primary way that superficial relationships progress to intimate relationships. Also, although self-disclosure can lead to more intimate relationships, it can also leave one or more person vulnerable. And it's like, yeah, of course, it's going to leave you more vulnerable, right? If you tell your secrets to someone, they're going to know your secrets. That's vulnerability. Okay, but again, if you want to progress from superficial, hi, my name's Josh, I'm buttoned up, we have a work relationship, we have a student-teacher relationship. If you want to reach towards like friendships with people, if you want to go beyond just like a handful of dates with someone and actually get to know them in a long-term relationship status, you have to open up to them, right? So we have a lot of superficial relationships with a lot of people. We know people's names, we know their profession, we know who we work with. But if you want to progress it deeper, you have to be willing to talk about topics that you don't talk about with everybody else, right? A lot of people know your name, they know what your job is, right? They might have met your family before, but they're going to have to know some things about you that other people don't know. And that's where closeness in a relationship comes in, when you know things about someone that nobody else knows. All right. Again, relationships require what's called mutual vulnerability, right? It can't be one-sided. Mutually, we both have to be vulnerable with each other to the same degree. Some assumptions: relationships progress from non-intimate, and by intimate we don't mean romantic all the time. Intimate just means like a deeper satisfaction for the individual, right? Friendships can be deeply intimate, right? But relationships progress from non-intimate to more intimate relationships, so you know more information about a person that is more personal. Relationships develop in generally systemic and predictable. They do unfold in predictable fashions. Like we sort of know the script with regard to how friendships should unfold. Relationships include deep penetration and dissolution. So people pull back, people end the relationship, people cut people off, friendships dissolve. Breakups happen with boyfriends and girlfriends, right? And then finally, self-disclosure is at the core of any relationship development, okay? So you have to be willing to disclose information. You have to be willing to open up to your partner. If there's a conflict, you have to be willing to talk it out. You can't just ignore it. So a little exercise you can do for yourself, right? So first and foremost, think about the most personal thing at your core, right? What are a handful of things that are just deeply personal to you, right? And then think about, what's the most personal thing you're willing to share with other people? And you can make a list. What's the most personal thing I'm willing to share with my mom, with my boyfriend, girlfriend, with my teacher, with my boss, right? So make a list of like 10 people in your life. Figure out what's the most personal thing at your core, and then what's the most personal thing I'm willing to share with each of those individuals. And the fact of the matter is going to be different, right? There's going to be things that you are more willing to share with your mom that you're never going to share with me, your professor. All right. So that's one way to think about, how close am I to these individuals in my life? And if I'm really that close to them, am I actually sharing and being vulnerable in a way that illustrates that closeness? All right, the process of bonding that moves relationships from superficial to personal. Again, right? Trajectory, the path, the way, the closeness. There are predictable steps. We use this metaphor as the peeling of the onion. This is just a common metaphor that you should be aware of, right? So people are onions. They all have layers. We peel back those layers, and we get to sort of the core of who the individual is. Just know this is the metaphor. All right. The layers, we always start with a public image, right? So what's our outer layer, what everyone can see? There's some really cool research out there right now that talks about social media influence on the ways in which people have this public persona. And I like this metaphor of we are all museum curators of our own lives, right? So we all have this like junk in our life, like lots and lots of junk, good junk, bad junk, whatever. But when it comes to social media, we sort of like very carefully and meticulously like only show you the good stuff. We have a lot of like kind of, little secrets about ourselves. We're like, I'm not putting that up on Facebook. It's like my favorite band is really the Backstreet Boys, but I'm not going to put it on Facebook, right? Something weird like that. You all have little weird things about your life that you're not going to put, out front on social media. Okay? But we all start with a public image. Like it's like I want to come in to work. I want to be dressed up. I want to be well manicured. I want to show you that I have like a nice car, or I listen to the correct music, or I'm reading the correct books. So we all have that, right? The layers start to get peeled back only to certain individuals. I was just thinking right now, there's like these really, I think it's very weird, but there's these companies out there now who will come in and curate your bookshelves for you because so many people are on Zoom. And if you look at the bookshelves behind them, my bookshelves are off to the side here. Um, people have been getting in trouble because they like end up on the news and their bookshelves behind them. Someone's like, oh my God, they have this like controversial book on their bookshelf. Um, and so they actually have professionals who come in now in the last, year or so with like everything on Zoom. That people will come in and like curate your bookshelf for you. Like, here are the correct books that should be behind you so that people think that you are smart and intelligent and that you are sort of like, in the cool kids conversations. And I think that's weird. I don't necessarily judge people by their bookshelves. I have, roughly 600 or 700 books. Plenty of them are controversial. Plenty of them contradict each other, right? I have, plenty of political books that are in direct contradiction to each other, right? But if you have a good amount of books, it's like some of them you're going to disagree with, right? And that's fine. All right. But that's what we all start with. We want to put out this good public image of ourselves. All right, what everyone's allowed to see. The layers only get peeled back by certain people. There's a form of reciprocity. So as others share things with us, we feel comfortable sharing sensitive information with them. So again, you think about you go on a date and someone starts sharing information about their family, you feel comfortable sharing information about your family. All right. Breadth is the amount of topics we're willing to talk about. So you might say, I'm willing to talk about a lot of topics. The depth is the degree of intimacy shared about a given topic. So you might say, here's a lot of topics, but I'm not willing to go deep into any of them. Or here's a lot of topics. I'll go real deep into a religious conversation, but I'm not going to go deep into a political conversation. All right. So breadth is the amount, depth is how deep each individual topics. And then there's a reward and cost. So is it worth sharing, right? So the pros and cons of sharing new information: if you share information, you can develop a deeper relationship with someone, right? But it could also, you might end up sharing information and that person is put off by it and they say, look, like you got something going on, you got to go take care of it. I can't be a part of this, right? So yeah, so you have this reward cost conversation. And it differs person to person. So with a boss, with a person you're dating, obviously with a person you're dating, if you want it to be a long-term relationship, you're gonna have to share a lot of information with them. If you're just in it for like a short-term relationship, you might say like, look, this is just a summer romance, and I'm not gonna share a lot of information with you because I don't want to mess it up. I want to keep both of us pristine. I don't want us to have bad ideas about each other. So let's just have this like summer fling, and then when the fall comes, we'll go our separate ways, and we'll keep this idealized image of each other in our minds, right? But if you want to have a long-term relationship, the reward is long-term, but the cost is I got to tell you some stuff, all right? So peeling back the layers. With regard to the layers, exploratory, just there's emergence of individual personalities. Affect exchanges, we start to use personal idioms. So you and your siblings might have inside jokes with each other. You and your parents might have inside jokes with each other. And a stable exchange is when the personal systems of communication, how those individuals communicate with you, right? So you have what's called dyadic uniqueness. So here's a fun little note that some mom left her kid, right? I spent 1.5 hours cleaning this kitchen. If you mess it up, I will cut you. Obviously, the mom's not going to say that to her boss, right? But it's like you and your mom might have these cute little jokes where you talk about, injuring each other. But you all know that it's like all in good fun and it's just a joke. You and your buddies, are gonna, you know, um, rip on each other in certain ways. You have certain jokes, right? You can make fun of each other. If someone outside your group makes fun of each other, or makes fun of you, that's not allowed, right? It's like I can pick on my little brother. You're not allowed to pick on my little brother, right? So that's an effective exchange. Who is allowed to engage in these personal idioms, these inside jokes, as opposed to who's not to? So we have these in-group, out-groups that happen with regard to the layers. And if someone knows you on a very deep level, yeah, they're allowed to make like very contentious jokes towards you, very what might be perceived as very hurtful jokes, but they're allowed to do it because you know that that's the kind of relationship you have because you know each other so well. All right, and finally, the sort of exception to this rule, this phenomenon known as the stranger on the train phenomenon. All right, so this is a phenomenon that you might have experienced if you've ever been on a train or in a plane or some strange place that is very unique to you. Right? It's a phenomenon where strangers share very personal information they have in very public spaces. So you get on a plane, you sit next to somebody who's a complete stranger, and they start telling you about their significant other, the problems going on in their marriage. Maybe it's an older person. They're talking to you about the grandkids they're going to go visit for in Christmas, right? Or they might start telling you about some of like the personal struggles they're having, right? Um, you get to this question of like, why do people share, or why have you shared information, right? Like you're getting on a train to like, I don't know, go break up with your significant other, and you have to talk it out with a stranger on the train, right? And the reason is that people don't feel the vulnerability because it's a stranger and you're never going to see him again, right? So there is this stranger on the train phenomenon where people share deep information, but they share that deep information because at the end of the day, mutual vulnerability doesn't need to happen because the assumption is that that person doesn't know who you are and they're never going to see you again. All right. If you're in a classroom with a classmate sitting next to you and that classmate's a stranger, you're probably not going to tell them information because the next day you come into class, you don't want to see them and feel awkward about the personal information you shared. But if you're ever in a situation where there's a legit stranger who you might not even know their name, you come in, you have a conversation, you walk away, and that's the end of the relationship. People are more apt to share personal information with a stranger in these types of situations. All right. Okay. That's all I have on this section for social penetration theory. Watch that clip from Meet Joe Black if you haven't. Watch the movie if you haven't either. It's a good movie to kind of watch on a, cozy up with some friends. Have a few beverages if you're of age, and just think about life a little bit. It's a really good movie. Okay, I will see you all next time.